So yes, I'd first like to welcome everybody to the session. We're going to talk about drones and humanitarian action, and we're going to look at the results of pretty much 1 year of research, and we also hear from some people who have some additional points of view to contribute to that. So my name is Timo Luege. I'm currently working with CartONG, and today for the roundtable here, we are being joined by Denise Soeliso from FSD, Kristin Sandvik from the Peace Research Institute in Oslo, then Sylvie de Laborderie from CartONG, and last but not least, Nate Smith from Open Aerial Map. And yeah, so this is what we'll be talking about. I think just how I'd like to do this, I'd like to have also time for you guys to ask questions. So what we do is we're first going to have a couple of presentations, and then we'll just go into questions, both questions, you know, just for general for the panel, but also for you. This is built as a round table, and this is not very round, as you can see, so I really would like to include all of you. So please ask your questions at the end, that would be great. And with that, I'd just like to hand over to Denise.
Well, thanks for the introduction, Timo. And thank you for everyone for coming. And especially to CartONG for putting on this conference. What I'm going to do is actually, I was told I have 10 minutes, so what I'm going to do is sort of give you a very broad overview of where we're standing right now with this issue on drones in humanitarian action. And I feel like it's really necessary because if you followed the issue about 2 years ago, there was a lot of hype around it. A lot of newspapers were writing about it. And a lot of it had to do with basically non-traditional humanitarian actors coming into the field and in a cowboy fashion, that's the word that's been used, that Andre used earlier today, basically started to fly their own consumer drones. And as a humanitarian community, we figured out this is actually, stop, this is dangerous. It's creating a lot of liability. And so when we started this project, this is kind of the context that we came into. People were very much turned off to the subject of drones. And personally, for me, it was important to bring the discussion back to the humanitarian actors and to see, okay, now we've had all this backlash and we've had a lot of non-traditional actors, but is there maybe anything that we can use this tool for? Is there anything that we can actually do with it if we ended up using it for ourselves and not had external people look at it? So this is really where we were coming from. And so I just want to give you a bit of a backstory how it's not working. Can I get some help with this? Well, I'm just going to continue talking without the slides, but what did you do?
Nothing.
Well, just to give you my background, I work for the Swiss Foundation for Mine Action, and traditionally we are a humanitarian demining organization, and we have just a very small headquarters in Geneva, and most of our operations is actually in the field. So we are very operational, and we're currently active in 9 countries, and we have former operations in 30. Next. So for us,
slide.
This is what we typically encounter in the field when we try to run our operations, and we often deal with very severe sort of logistical problems. There's not a lot of infrastructure in place, be it floods or infrastructure is just completely missing. And then on top of it, we have an issue of missing maps. So back in 2009, actually, we were probably one of the earliest humanitarian organizations to internally start looking into, okay, can we use drones as a tool that could help us actually do our work better? Maybe go back one more time. So this is this is a model from 2009, and it's very bulky, and we needed 2 pilots to keep it flying in the air, and all it did, sort of this 2-meter long thing, all it did, it had a camera that let us have some pictures of some of the sites we were working at. And the worst thing is it didn't know how to land, so we always had to bring a fishing net that you see over there to get the drone back out of the air. So that was a challenge. Now forward 7 years, and our mapping drones have changed. And so here on the left you actually see Sylvie holding a fairly small drone in her hands. And today, one person can pretty easily pilot several of them at the same time, and they're nice and small. And the best thing is you can actually pack them up and mount them on a donkey if you have to transport them somewhere. Next. So that being said, drones have really turned into a consumer good. There's
I think it works now. It's this one.
Yeah. There's a really wide variety of them on the market, and they're fairly accessible to people. And it's not a surprise that there are now a lot of humanitarian organizations that have sort of for themselves looked into how they might be able to make use of this technology. So we're definitely not alone. But what we're really looking at is to improve the quality and efficiency of the aid that we can deliver. And a lot of it comes down to making best use of the resources that we have. And so in this context, EU Humanitarian Aid had asked us to do this research project to basically look at how can we use drones to do that for us. Sort of what I said, taking the discussion into the humanitarian realm, take it sort of out of this cowboy context and really take a hard look at, are there any use cases where it would make sense for us to use drones? We're doing it in collaboration with a number of organizations, including CartONG, who you know as your dear hosts. The main output of this research is actually going to be, I call it a guide on the use of drones for humanitarian actors. It's really going to be more of a landscape view of here, these are the best use cases that we found, and here are some sort of leading issues to go into. And we're looking at a number of applications, so mapping, cargo, monitoring, and search and rescue. There's a lot of research that went into it. When we started out, actually, we were actually asked to just put together or to collect all the available information that was out there back when we started. But then I actually started to look at, okay, what is out there? And there was not much out there. We didn't know what the use cases were. So we started almost from scratch, looking back at past deployments and evaluating them. So other humanitarian organizations, we asked them, what have you done? Was it useful? What would you do better in the future? And the result of that is these case studies that are all online now, where we try to be pretty honest about how it went. But that being said, we also tried to just find the best deployments that had been done. Secondly, we're using drones in the field. So we've mostly used proven technology and then applied it in a humanitarian context where we were fairly certain that it could add a value. And then we had a number of stakeholder consultations, especially on mapping and cargo drones. So all of that is actually going into this guide. And if you just want the quick and dirty summary, read the 40 pages of the main publication. Now, what I said, we're looking at the most promising users. And they're basically boiling down to just a few areas if you really want to get the gist of things. And one is localized, very small localized damage assessments. Another one is situational awareness. So if you're in the field and this would be a tactical use and you need to have a quick overview of where are the roads damaged or what do things look like, you can use a drone. A third one is monitoring changes of a location. So you would probably repeatedly map an area. And last one would be this is sort of looking into the future, the delivery of very lightweight essential items. This would be in the cargo realm. So before, also very early on in this research, we also looked at what do humanitarians actually think about using drones. So we asked about 196 humanitarians that worked in all sorts of fields around the world, what they thought about using drones themselves. And to me, it's quite surprising that there are 60% that said, yes, you know, I feel quite good about it and I'm interested to find out more. But also important, there was a bit less than a quarter that had severe reservations to using this technology. And some of the reasons that were cited was the military connotation and history of it. So I think we will go a bit more deeper into the survey results later in discussion. But this is just the overview. Also, we asked them, what would you use drones for? What is of most interest to you? And 90% actually said, well, mapping is what they want to do, followed by monitoring and sort of having real-time information. And then some of smaller users like search and rescue applications and cargo delivery. This one is interesting. It's just one question that I picked out of the survey where we asked people, basically, do you agree with the statement? So do you think local people are threatened by the use of drones? And a majority, 60%, said yes. Actually, I think communities would feel threatened by it. And based on the case studies, the past deployments that we had looked at, this is not quite what we found. And actually, so I just picked this one out, but it's almost the opposite has happened, where people that have done mapping projects with drones in the field, they've had to always very much involve the community because you just can't get away mapping with these kinds of drones without informing the authorities and informing the community, and everybody's going to see you launch these drones. So this is actually a fairly positive takeaway that I have based on the past deployments that we have seen. So people, they're interested and they come out and they're sort of curious about the technology. And there's a bit of a sort of a pride or an ownership that's been taken over the maps that have been created. And I think, I don't know if we're able to go more into that later, but so this to me is a very positive and surprising takeaway on this whole drone issue. How are we doing on time?
You're getting there.
I'm getting there. Okay, so this is basically, I will not dwell on this issue much longer, but for me, the main takeaway is that drones, they're literally just a tool. They're not going to revolutionize the way we do aid, but there are some very legitimate use cases that we have. And, you know, like any other tool, we have to learn how to use it, and we have to learn how to use it properly. And also manage expectations. But there are a few things that in very specialized settings, I think we have enough evidence that it would make sense to maybe use a drone over the alternatives that we have. Yeah, thank you. If you are interested in any of the case studies, they're all on the website drones.fst.ch, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much for giving us this overview of the project. And with that, I'm handing over to Kristin.
So since I'm the academic here, I'm going to do that by PowerPoint, which is what I do to my students as well. Left click.
They need to load it.
He did.
No. Just wait a minute.
Anyhow, so I work at the University of Oslo and at PRIO, and I used to direct something called the Norwegian Center for Humanitarian Studies. I've also been part of the advisory board for Aviators, and now I'm no longer, since I'm a board member of HIF, Humanitarian Innovation Fund. But I've been working with drones and humanitarian cyberspace issues for about 5 years. I consulted a bit with Denise for the survey. So my comments are based on my kind of experience with the humanitarian drone community over the last number of years. So I think what she says is really crucial. You know, we have to find and identify good user cases to make sure that, you know, when the hype passes, there's still something to be retained. And a lot of this is to actually identify added value in an appropriate way. But we have to do something more to understand this landscape of humanitarian drones, because it links very much with humanitarian mapping, with humanitarian data, responsible data, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's part of the humanitarian technology field, but there's also something specific with drones, right? Drones are iconic. Drones are part of an unmanned war in the global battlefield. Drones have been around for a long time. Drones have a history that most of us are not aware of. During my research, for example, I learned that the South African apartheid regime had used or given drones to the Rhodesian government in the Zimbabwean Liberation War in 1978. So who knew, right, that drones were used for surveillance in African liberation wars in the 80s, for example. So there are a lot of things we don't know about drones yet. Drones have come into the humanitarian field for a specific purpose. We need to understand that purpose. We need to understand how humanitarians and outsiders talk about drones together, how the work we do as humanitarians might be part of the political currency for other actors, and how we should go about thinking ethically about drones. So this is a survey, right? Despite growing interests, no systematic efforts has been made to understand if, how, and in what circumstances the use of drones can deliver added value to humanitarian work. The survey is very clear that this is just, we're just beginning to develop a baseline, and we're just trying to have a systematic conversation. Because what's key here, what's different with the use of drones in humanitarian settings from development settings and peacekeeping and whatnot, is that this takes place within the frame of humanitarian imperatives of doing no harm and assisting according to need. And humanitarian drone use should also conform with principles of neutrality, impartiality, universality, and so on and so forth. So that's my first question is what's going on? And here I think a little bit of drone theory actually comes in quite handy. So what do outsiders want? They want to build a moral economy around humanitarian drones to sanitize drones, open civil airspace in the global north, and create business opportunities. What do we want? Well, some of us would like the drones to fix our problems with everything, right? We tried rights-based approaches in the late 90s and early 2000s. They didn't quite work. So humanitarians have now turned to technology. We hope the technology is going to fix what human rights couldn't do for us, broadly speaking. So the first drone theory is what I call drone utopianism. This is very theoretical, but it actually might be useful for you. So technological utopianism is this belief in technological progress as inevitable and that it can achieve a perfect society in a new future. So in humanitarianism, this would be, we can make a perfect humanitarianism if we can just use enough technology and use it right. In the cosmology of drone utopianism, technology substitutes for politics and becomes the solution for a bunch of problems, right? You can have a drone that helps you with the last mile problem. It will help suffering African children. It will basically do all the risk assessments you need to do. There's a humanitarian drone for almost everything, if you look at the language of its promoters. The second thing is this business about building a moral economy for drones. When I started working on this a couple of years ago, I would get emails from Northrop Grumman, for example, asking me if I wanted to come to North Dakota and talked to the military people about the beauty of humanitarian drones. They were very keen on labeling their products as humanitarian. Obama licensed the use of armed drones over Libya in 2011 as a form of humanitarian assistance. So the concept is that environment in which social expectations, cultural transactions, and emotional investments collectively create a shared understanding between the participants in an economic exchange. And sometimes this is what I feel has been going on in the humanitarian drone field. You have business interests that come to us with their drones. They want to find humanitarian uses, so they will look better. Also because they can't really test their products in civil airspace in the US or in Europe. They want to go to Africa, have some sort of humanitarian branding on this, and try out their products and come back and sell them in the Western market. So the objective is to make drones seem more useful, safe, and legitimate, and ease the path to civil airspace access while underscoring issues of cost, effectiveness, and precision. If you look at some of the rhetoric surrounding drone use in Africa, I think sometimes it just feels like we are in early post-colonial times, to be honest. Linked with this is the problem of ethics. You know, what should be ethical? What is an ethical use of a humanitarian drone? And I just want to point this out to you because at the moment I feel we're sort of lost in the forest. So I think the humanitarian drone links to 3 different ethical landscapes. The first is the effort made to develop drone-specific instruments. The second links up to humanitarian innovation, and the third one links up to the responsible data movement. So Aviators has made a code of conduct. No big UN agency has been interested in taking this up. It keeps evolving, but it's also sort of orphaned. In Sheffield, we discussed the code of conduct and realized that if we're going to do cargo drones as well in the humanitarian community, the cargo drone is a very different animal that plugs into a very sophisticated multi-billion-dollar logistics discourse where the last mile problem is the real problem. It's very different from mapping and monitoring. The humanitarian innovation landscape has a couple of codes of conduct and standards and guides, nothing specific on UAVs. There was an initiative a couple of years ago to develop principles for ethical humanitarian innovation. This initiative has also sort of been abandoned and need to be reactivated. The third one is the responsible data movement, which is still sort of, I feel, gaining in force. So eventually everything is about data, including for drones. And I think this is somewhere we probably need to turn to develop ethical uses of drones in the future. Well, was that the last page? No? Can you? There's just one more page. Yeah. No, that's wrong. Oh. So finally, just to sum up. So I think where do we go from here to have good drone ethics? I mean, the first one is getting sober, right? When is it useful and ethical to use drones? How should we use them? Your finding on the mandatory nature of consultations is very positive. I have to say, somewhat unexpected. I hope the people you did case studies with were also insured. You know, what kind of expectations should we have to these actors? I think we need to adopt norms with respect to responsible data from the humanitarian community at large. We can't invent our own norms and responsible data. We need to have go by the same rules as everyone else. Then we need to realize that something is special with drones. Drones have a physicality. They can actually fall down and injure someone. Drones have pilots that sometimes are difficult to manage in a crisis setting when they show up with their drones, as was in the case of Nepal. And drones have iconic status. Insurance, for example, of drones is a really significant issue that doesn't really show up, for example, in humanitarian mapping. I think it's really important now that we have local and sort of organic reflections on ethics and management. For example, the humanitarian mapping community, when you guys start using drones in your work, you know, have this as it's part of the work you do, and please communicate back to the humanitarian drone community about your conversations, because it will not do to have, you know, a few people do this and to have it trickle down. I think we need to talk about this. I also hope that somebody, and I don't know who that somebody should be, would take ownership on standardization and crunching community standards for ethical drone use. And then, we can have a discussion back and forth for a couple of years. There's a new global alliance for humanitarian innovation, GAHI, that might be an opportunity for drone ethics. Not quite sure, but I look forward to continue that discussion, and I've probably used up all my time. Well, the good drone, this is my own stuff. If you're interested, everything is on Academia EDU. Just Google my name. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And yes, the mouse. Yeah, thank you for also giving a little bit that context. And I think this is also something where I'm hoping that later, when we take questions, this is something we can really get into. But for now, I'd like to hand over to Sylvie, who's going to talk a little bit more about mapping and about search and rescue. You use that? Okay, mouse.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me well? Yeah, can't hear myself. So I will be presenting the mapping and search and rescue part of this study. It's all about the finding we have. As CartONG, as Denise said, we take a piece of implementation for these two parts. So I base this presentation on the case study and deployment we did so far. There is still some case study ongoing. So about mapping. Mapping is one of the most common and most popular applications used in humanitarian world because it's due to the technology and also due to some firm like Sandvik who did very, I don't want to promote Sandvik, but they did some very good tool, very user-friendly, and all the process is well done. So you can have this automated workflow from the flight to the data processing. What you can expect as an output when using a drone for mapping. So what we have mainly, it's accurate dimensional maps, elevation models when you can get some contour lines, thermal maps, not really used in humanitarian world, and 3D maps. So what are the advantages of using a drone for mapping? So it's all this finding as part of the case study. So using a drone for very small area is really it's really appropriate. You can also use a drone in some places where there are a lot of cloud, like in Central Africa, on this part of the globe. But that doesn't mean that you can fly if it's cloudy. So it just means that the drone is flying lower than a plane or an helicopter. So it can take some picture when satellite imagery, for instance, can't. It's better to use a drone, I would say, to monitor a situation for some area like camp mapping or IDP urban settings. So you can fly quickly and you can deploy fastly your drones. And then to create the very precise elevation model, using a drone is really appropriate in a small area as well. So about data processing and analysis, it's a part that you can't ignore. So really, this depends on your needs. If you want to fly over a big area, if you want to have a very, very good precision, you will have a big effort for data analysis. You will need a very good computer with fast process. You will need a lot of storage for your data, and you will especially need very organized about your data management. So you can be lost very easily. But it can also be done in a snap. If you are flying over a very small area, your precision is not that high, like 10 centimeters or 20 centimeters. So your drone is flying higher. So at the end, you have less data. So it will be fast to analyze, and you can even analyze your data when you are in the field. So you can come back from a mission with your data ready. So how do you choose which solution? It's up to you to really, before doing a deployment, to define what you want for your success. So this is related to the safety. I won't talk here about the regulation in the country, but you need to take into account the safety environments. You need to really do a comparison about the tools, like is it useful, is it relevant to use a drone? Can you do the same with a satellite imagery? I think it's not, you don't lose time if you take this time to compare. And is that suit your objective? So here it's a summary about the case study that are part of the global report. So you can see different amount of data and the time required to process it. So as you can see, it's a bit slow. I don't know if you can see, but for instance, in Tanzania, we have 700 gigabytes, and it takes 6 weeks to analyze everything. And in comparison, in Haiti, there was 3 gigabytes. So in few areas, you can do the processing. So I mean, this aim to just aware that this is not only flying; it's also data processing. About cost factors, like we can't. It's always an eternal question. So you have your investment to buy the material, but in terms of manpower, cost factor, you have the preparation. You need to deal with the governments, with local communities, as Denise said, with local authorities to have the right to fly the drone in the country. Then you need to do the data collection itself. So you need to plan your flights. It could take some time. You need to fly and to, I mean, no, this is not for flying. You mean to, you need to maintain, to do the maintenance of your material. So it can take some time as well and some costs. And you need to have pilots, I would say 2. It's better, so it's also, in terms of cost, important. And then you have the data processing. It could be, as we said just earlier, it could be slow. It could take some weeks. So also factor for money. And then the data analysis. That when you finish your data processing, are you able to analyze yourself your data, or do you need a specialist, an expert, to look at your data? This is also very important. Like if you do a 3D models on a valley, like we saw in Tajikistan, are you able to analyze as a geologist point of view? So it's really a question. So you need also to build this whole project team to analyze your data. More specifically on emergency response mapping, so this is also the funding of the research. So it was not yet a success. Like this is not success. Why it's not a success? Because drones were not used directly immediately following the emergency. Immediately mean 72 hours after the disaster. So it's already too late. Like you can see, in average, it takes almost 6 days for the drone to arrive. So, for instance, for a flooding area or earthquake, it's already too late. And also the local capacity is very limited now, so it's also a weakness. But there is a lot of ways to improve the use of drone in emergency response mapping. It could work. So the success is when you have the capacity direct in the country. So you don't have to wait for the drone to arrive; it's already there. If your team of first responder, like civil protection, are equipped with drone, it will reduce the response time and the cost. But they need to incorporate this new tool in their process to be a success. Yeah, that is written. Yeah. Okay. What's the way forward for mapping drones? The main issue is the stigma that surrounds the use of the drone. It's important for decision maker and humanitarians that a drone like this small, I will say, it's not a toy, but it looks like a toy. It's really not a military drone, so it's really a prejudice for the use of the drone. On the technical level, on data management, we need more structured data management and data sharing platform. And as Kristin said also, for emergency response, it's really, really important that pilots are operational. And when they arrive in a disaster scene, they know humanitarian roles and they know how to work with the team. So I think that's it for the mapping part, and I will pass to the search and rescue finding. So we did not do a lot of field mission. We did one simulation in France where we can test 2 drones during like a simulation of a disaster. It was a cyclone in a non-existing country. So this aim was to help the civil protection to look at where are the missing people or how to better know the scene. So what we found is like in an early stage of emergency, this is not the time to test a drone and to test new technology. So a civil protection team and a search and rescue team need to integrate this before they are deploying for real. And for this search and rescue part, we also found that drones are most useful when they are equipped with a specific captor, like a thermal camera, as you can see here. And you can see some hotspot, and you can maybe send some team to really define if it's a victim or not. For monitoring and rapid damage assessment and real-time information, we didn't do deployment for that. The principle is that the data is delivered immediately. So it's a real cost to have this technology now. So it's still under development. The aim is like the team can see the scene and then send like a first team after having seen on the screen what can be in this. They can do a rapid assessment. Humanitarian also are interested to test a drone with monitoring distribution of goods, but we didn't do that. And they are also interested to identifying and analyzing temporary settlement or to track movement population. But so far it's not real, and it's an improvement that we can test in the future with the use of drone. I think with Denise we like Tajikistan, so I put the same picture. And I will end my presentation here. Yeah.
Thank you, Sylvie, for giving us kind of the hands-on examples for mapping and search and rescue. And now we're actually having Denise a second time to talk about cargo drones. Would you like the microphone, or do you want to use this one? Okay.
Thank you for bearing my presence on the stage twice. Cargo drones are actually a completely different game from the other applications that Sylvie just talked about. And for one thing, is there is a huge industry behind it, and there's no doubt in my mind that in the next 5 to 10 years that will actually be a reality, whether we like it or not. For all of us, that will see cargo drones making deliveries here in France and in Europe. So actually there's a quiet little race going on in the background with all these tech companies trying to get the first really viable commercialized cargo drone out there. And that's sort of the landscape that we're playing in. Okay, and it's not about humanitarianism. This is about companies seeing a business case, a global business case for cargo drones. That being said, it's so difficult to make a reliable cargo drone that you can't go to a store and buy yourself a drone that can deliver items. They are all of them that you get right now are prototypes, so they're very early models. So I'm just going to show you a couple of pictures just to give you an idea. This is one type that sort of runs with these rotors, and it happens to be one that was used for a UNICEF test case, but you have kind of a parcel that fits in between the mainframe of the drone, and that then will deliver whatever you put in that parcel. And then another very common model is something like that you see here. It sort of is a bit larger, it has wings, but it also has rotors. So what it does is it takes off vertically, and then it switches over to its wings and it flies, and then it switches again to the rotors to land. So it sort of does a very strange flying movement that we haven't seen so much until now. But what you notice also is that even these cargo drones, they're all not really large craft. They're all pretty small for so what we would imagine a drone to be. Also, what we notice is that cargo drones, the first use cases that every company is jumping on is actually the use of medical delivery of important medicines, anti-venom, blood samples. So that's also really taking up in the health field, and especially in health development and in places with not so much developed infrastructure. I just want to present a couple of case studies that we know, and one is actually MSF. And it's not a surprise that MSF is I think the first humanitarian organization that has gone to the field with drones. In this specific case, they're in Papua New Guinea, and they're dealing with an outbreak of a multi-strain resistant tuberculosis strain. And basically they're working in a jungle, and a few months of the year, the roads are very difficult to pass. At the same time, in order to diagnose the tuberculosis, they have to get samples as fast as possible to their diagnostic centers because these samples expire. So what they realized is that land is difficult for a lot of times throughout the year, and so they went into the field and tried to use cargo drones for this. So effectively, what they did is they had the Karima hospital where they had all the diagnostics, and they had to link that up with a local clinic that's about 40 to 43 kilometers away. So it's not really a huge distance if you have a road, and it's not a long distance by air. One thing they managed to do is they cut down the transportation time from an average of 4 hours if the weather is okay to only 55 minutes. But as I said, these are all prototypes they worked with, so that they never managed to actually fly the drone the whole 43 kilometers. They had to land the drone in a village in between and then swap batteries and then send it off again. To MSF, that was a major inconvenience, so much so that they said this is not going to be worth it for us. We can't use this technology if we have to swap batteries in between. The other thing is they actually lost a few drones because they crashed in the forest, so it was also a bit difficult for them to continue with this kind of model. But to them, this use case is so important that now these months they're actually taking up tests again with a different drone that is a bit more advanced and that can actually fly the whole distance. So there's a lot of, to me it seems like they're actually just waiting for the technology to catch up to deliver to their needs, which is very different from what I see with the mapping drones, where we say, okay, we have these wonderful mapping devices, now how can we include them in humanitarian work? So it's kind of the reverse thing going on. So these are just tests with MSF, meaning they just delivered a few samples. And I'm showing you some slides now from a company that Zipline that has just very recently done a huge media yahoo because they launched the first commercial operation of mapping drones. And basically, their whole business model is to have fairly small drones operate out of containers that they set up maybe next to health centers. And then they have 2 or 3 staff per container remotely pilot these drones. And they've done, of course, cost estimations, and to them, they're basically just doing this with the government to deliver blood samples. The drone that they call Zip flies autonomously, so that was important. It only carries up to 1.5 kilogram of load, and it has about 150 kilometer reach. The advantage of this drone apparently is that it doesn't have to land. It actually just drops the cargo and it sort of parachutes it down to where it's supposed to be, and then it returns back to the container. So they're very, very ambitious, and this is a commercial service. So they think they can actually beat, in terms of pricing, they think they can beat the motorcyclists and the people on bikes to do this, and their customer is the Rwandan government. What they want to do is actually handle all the deliveries of 21 transfusion facilities in the whole country. So this is really a nationwide thing that they're trying to set up. And ultimately, actually, they want to expand to other medical goods as well. Anything that you can fit into a 1.5 kilogram little box that you can transport, they plan on doing. So this is the first commercialized use of drones that we see for cargo delivery. I don't know if I mean, we can talk about the reasons why this is done in Africa. And there's a lot of criticism also, and one of them might be that no one gets to test this kind of prototype technology in Europe. We wouldn't be very happy with people flying blood transfusion over our heads, and when we're not really that sure that the drones are safe. So there's a bit of, I think this is a good example for a lot of good things that you can do with this technology, but there's a bit of criticism here as well. Not to bore you with any tables, but I just want to give you an idea of the technology that's being developed right now. So this is a table that we put together as part of the research, and most of the types. So okay, first you see some big players here. You have Amazon, you have Google, you have Zipline at the bottom, and DHL. So there are a lot of larger companies that are going into the business. A lot of them have not been really tested in the field. And the ones that are flying in the field, they are only able to carry about 1 to 3 kilograms of cargo. So there's nothing sort of, no large deliveries that are being made, and not for the foreseeable future. Then if you look at range, we're looking at something between 12 kilometers, which is maybe useful or maybe useless, depends on what you're trying to do, up to 500 kilometers for a system that hasn't even developed yet. So they only have plans for it. So this is the range of this very early game in the cargo field. what we've seen, sort of the companies that have gone into the humanitarian field, here the small ones, Vayu, Zipline, Quantum Systems maybe, the really big players haven't really come out yet. So I think we'll see some fairly large changes quite soon. So what are the main takeaways with cargo drones? As you can tell, it's a bit questionable how much we can use this technology in the humanitarian field. For us, where I see the potential is, okay, there will be systems set up in countries, there are development projects, and maybe this is something that we can count on piggybacking on. So if you have emergency deliveries to make, maybe this is a system that will, improve resilience and help us in certain response scenarios as well. And then the next point is that really the things that you can deliver are very small packages and items, and most likely we will see most of the development in the health and development field. So again, it's not really specific to humanitarian users. This is my last slide. A bit dry on the last slide, but just to give you an overview, I hope that did it.
Thank you. And now last but not least, Nate, do you want this mic or do you want that mic? Then I'll just give you the clicker. And
all right. So, what time do we have to end?
you have 10 minutes.
10 minutes, all right. Wait for my slides. I'm Nate, so I work with the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team, and we'll be talking about Open Aerial Map and a little bit of what we've been doing for the last year, and as well as what we're working on. So we've learned a lot, and now we're working on a new project that is trying to improve and continue the things that we've been working on. Wait for my slides. There it is. Oh wow, really wide. So I'm with HOT, but a number of other partners are working on an Open Aerial Map, including Development Seed, Azalea, Stamen, and one thing is, like, we know imagery is difficult to work with. It's hard to collect in environments, but it's also hard to work with, and so nowadays with more UAVs, but like Open Aerial Map, we're also talking about satellite imagery, any type of aerial imagery. There's small, like big satellites are moving into small satellites. Large manned aircraft are moving into unmanned small aircraft, and so it's easy to collect imagery like this shot over Tacloban in the Philippines, or this post-disaster in the Ecuador, and being able to collect a lot of imagery, and now we need to figure out how to store it, how to publish it, and then how to find it and be able to use it. And these are these three things are what we're trying to work on at Open Aerial Map. And so, but the main thing is imagery is critical for creating maps and baseline data. Like, this is the thing that we want to solve, and so having aerial imagery gives us better maps, gives us better baseline data. One of the big things is imagery is a supplier to OpenStreetMap, and so so the OpenStreetMap community needs open and updated imagery. This is actually I'm on a PDF, and so this is usually a GIF, but essentially by having updated imagery, we can then start to trace and digitize, which is a number of presentations have already talked about how the uses of mapping, drones for mapping. And so Open Aerial Map is really this open collection of aerial imagery, both satellite and drones. And it's essentially a set of tools, but also a community for sharing and making this commons of aerial imagery. So it's a set of tools to browse and search and find, an API, and then a contribution, like publishing mechanisms to be able to upload and share your imagery. So we've seen a couple overviews of like what this pipeline is from collecting. You have a whole bunch of images, and then you make a single orthomosaic. And Open Aerial Map really comes in at the end of the line. We're not doing collection We're not doing processing, but really like we're storing, sharing, and making it available to find. So here's an example. If you go to openareamap.org right now, you'll be able to see and click right in to see recent imagery just in the last 2 weeks we've been working with Digital Globe to make imagery available after the Hurricane Matthew in Haiti. And so the browser, you can click in and get an image, download it, or I can pull it straight into something like ID and start to digitize it and pull data from that imagery. So that's the browser. The API is a simple JSON API to allow you to build on top of it and start to you don't have to necessarily access just through openareamap.org and a web browser, but you can have a programmatic access. And then on top of that is an uploader, and so this contribution mechanism. How do I share, and how do I put my imagery into the commons? And so it's a simple form. We actually in the last couple of weeks have rolled out some new Dropbox, and we'll be rolling out some Google Drive access to allow different ways to store but then be able to contribute imagery into OpenAreaMap. So that's what we've been doing for the last year. We launched this in 2015, May, and we've been slowly kind of in this beta phase of understanding what are some of the challenges, who are some of like the early adopters and organizations that are collecting imagery and making it available. And so then this last year we've started working in the Pacific Islands with a secretariat body that's doing a lot of disaster risk reduction work called the Pacific Community. And they've been doing some drone flights, and so we teamed up with them to think about what is an OpenAreaMap application in the Pacific Islands, but also think through some of the things that we've identified that are challenges within sharing aerial imagery. So I'm going to kind of talk through this a little bit. So one of the big questions was, how do we continue to improve coordination around imagery? So there was duplication of flights, or let's say the University of the South of I'm blanking on USP, but anyways, they work with SPC, and they're very they want to know, okay, if you're flying a drone, I also want to know like what's your AOI, and can we maybe share some imagery? And so we've coordinated a little bit. And then can we test and document some guidelines and standards? But I don't like that word. I like actually your word norms is a much better word for mapping with UAVs. And so what are the things that we need to think about in sharing a flight plan or the type of metadata that we collect and share with that raw imagery? So we held a workshop in August with the SPC, with a number of the Fiji government, the Australian government. This is funded by the DFAT. The New Zealand government was there, and talk through what's their existing workflow, what are the different use cases that they're doing and wanting to think about, and then mapped out their UAV workflow of how do they plan a mission to using it and extracting data from it. And a common use case that they're both doing and then wanting to improve upon is extracting building footprints to be able to then do exposure mapping. So through this project right now, we're in the middle of it. We're looking to adjust metadata norms for sharing flight plans and coordinating guidelines for and tech for responsible data collection and sharing, and then improving the workflow for getting imagery out of the field in like a kind of a low bandwidth environment. Although this one's hard to address with pure tech, other than getting a better bandwidth. But there's some ways that we can work with. We're working with there's a new project called Open Drone Map, which is essentially an open source drone imagery processing software. And so then over the next 2 months, we're actually going to be building a small prototype and an imagery request and coordination app around what's your area of interest, your your flight plan and the details about it to be able to show progress, or I'm in the field, or I'm doing some post-processing, the data is not available yet, or it's been processed and now it's available in open aerial map. And so there's a bit of this kind of, let me see progress. Then we're going to be running some test flights, so kind of walking through this workflow. And then we're going to be establishing some more conduct and norms around for OEM and contributing and sharing through OEM. And so one thing that, so what have we learned since we're really starting is open imagery is super important for
set up in countries. There are development projects, and maybe this is something that we can count on piggybacking on. So if you have emergency deliveries to make, maybe this is a system that will, improve resilience and help us in certain response scenarios as well. And then the next point is that really the things that you can deliver are very small packages and items, and most likely we will see most of the development in the health and development field. So again, it's not really specific to humanitarian users. This is my last slide. A bit dry on the last slide, but just to give you an overview, I hope that did it.
Thank you. And now last but not least, Nate, do you want this mic or do you want that mic? Then I'll just give you the clicker. And
all right. So what time do we have to end?
you have 10 minutes.
10 minutes, all right. Wait for my slides. I'm Nate, so I work with the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team, and we'll be talking about Open Aerial Map and a little bit of what we've been doing for the last year, and as well as what we're working on. So we've learned a lot, and now we're working on a new project that is trying to improve and continue the things that we've been working on. Wait for my slides. There it is. Oh wow, really wide. So I'm with HOT, but a number of other partners are working on an open aerial map, including Development Seed, Azavia, Stamen. And one thing is, like, we know imagery is difficult to work with. It's hard to collect in environments, but it's also hard to work with. And so nowadays, with more UAVs, but like open aerial map, we're also talking about satellite imagery, any type of aerial imagery. There's big satellites are moving into small satellites. Large manned aircraft are moving into unmanned small aircraft, and so it's easy to collect imagery, like this shot over Tacloban in the Philippines, or this post-disaster in Ecuador, and being able to collect a lot of imagery, and now we need to figure out how to store it, how to publish it, and then how to find it and be able to use it. And these are these three things are what we're trying to work on at Open Aerial Map. And so, but the main thing is imagery is critical for creating maps and baseline data. Like, this is the thing that we want to solve. And so having aerial imagery gives us better maps, gives us better baseline data. One of the big things is imagery is a supplier to OpenStreetMap, and so so the OpenStreetMap community needs open and updated imagery. This is actually I'm on a PDF, and so this is usually a GIF, but essentially by having updated imagery, we can then start to trace and digitize, which is a number of presentations have already talked about how the uses of mapping, drones for mapping. And so Open Aerial Map is really this open collection of aerial imagery, both satellite and drones. And it's essentially a set of tools, but also a community for sharing and making this commons of aerial imagery. So it's a set of tools to browse and search and find, an API, and then a contribution, like publishing mechanisms to be able to upload and share your imagery. So we've seen a couple overviews of what this pipeline is from collecting. You have a whole bunch of images, and then you make a single orthomosaic, And OpenAeroMap really comes in at the end of the line. We're not doing collection, we're not doing processing, but really like we're storing, sharing, and making it available to find. So here's an example. You go to openairmap.org right now, you'll be able to see and click right in to see recent imagery just in the last 2 weeks we've been working with Digital Globe to make imagery available after the Hurricane Matthew in Haiti. And so the browser, you can click in and get an image, download it, or I can pull it straight into something like ID and start to digitize it and pull data from that imagery. So that's the browser. The API is a simple JSON API to allow you to build on top of it and start to you don't have to necessarily access just through openairmap.org and a web browser, but you can have a programmatic access. And then on top of that is an uploader, and so this contribution mechanism. How do I share and how do I put my imagery into the commons? And so it's a simple form. We actually in the last couple of weeks have rolled out some new Dropbox, and we'll be rolling out some Google Drive access to allow different ways to store but then be able to contribute imagery into OpenAeroMap. So that's what we've been doing for the last year. We launched this in 2015, May, and we've been slowly kind of in this beta phase of understanding what are some of the challenges, who are some of like the early adopters and organizations that are collecting imagery and making it available. And so then this last year we've started working in the Pacific Islands with a secretariat body that's doing a lot of disaster risk reduction work called the Pacific Community. And they've been doing some drone flights, and so we teamed up with them to think about what is an OpenAeroMap application in the Pacific Islands, but also think through some of the things that we've identified that are challenges within sharing aerial imagery. So I'm going to kind of talk through this a little bit. So one of the big questions was, how do we continue to improve coordination around imagery? So there was duplication of flights, or let's say the University of the South of I'm blanking on USP, but anyways, they work with the SPC, and they're very like they want to know, okay, if you're flying a drone, I also want to know like what's your AOI, and can we maybe share some imagery? And so we've coordinated a little bit. And then can we test and document some guidelines and standards? But I don't like that word. I like actually your word norms is a much better word for mapping with UAVs. And so what are the things that we need to think about in sharing a flight plan or the type of metadata that we collect and share with that raw imagery? So we held a workshop in August with the SPC, with a number of the Fiji government, the Australian government. This is funded by the DFAT. The New Zealand government was there, and talk through just these what's their existing workflow, what are the different use cases that they're doing and wanting to think about, and then mapped out their UAV workflow of how do they plan a mission to using it and extracting data from it. And a common use case that they're both doing and then wanting to improve upon is extracting building footprints to be able to then do exposure mapping. So through this project right now, we're in the middle of it. We're looking to adjust metadata norms for sharing flight plans and coordinating guidelines for and tech for responsible data collection and sharing, and then improving the workflow for getting imagery out of the field in like a kind of a low bandwidth environment. Although this one's hard to address with pure tech, other than getting a better bandwidth. But there's some ways that we can work with. We're working with there's a new project called Open Drone Map, which is essentially an open source drone imagery processing software. And so then over the next 2 months, we're actually going to be building a small prototype an imagery requesting coordination app around what's your area of interest, your flight plan, and the details about it, to be able to show progress. Or I'm in the field, or I'm doing some post-processing, the data is not available yet, or it's been processed and now it's available in open area map. And so there's a bit of this kind of, let me see progress. Then we're going to be running some test flights, so kind of walking through this workflow. And then we're going to be establishing some more conduct and norms around for OEM and contributing and sharing through OEM. And so one thing that, so what have we learned since we're really starting is open imagery is super important for
because you can't actually maintain a lot of flying across the globe to do repeated imagery. You want to have the capacity on the ground.
But I think just like we are now sort of experimenting with flying drones, we're experimenting with local participation and sustainable drone use. But I do think that this is partly going to go the way cell phones went. Everybody's going to have them, and they're going to make they're going to develop their own practices for how they use drones and how they use imagery and so on and so forth. I think one of the challenges with this pioneer phase is when we leave drones in places where you, for example, have social justice movements, having the drone and flying it and pointing out injustices to the local government, for example, can really change the kind of work that their partners are doing in the field. And, potentially subject them to risk because, people who have grabbed land, for example, don't want that to be revealed. So I think there are some things we need to think about that are kind of new to us as humanitarians. But yeah, it becomes human rights work instead of humanitarian work.
And just about the technical point of view, now if you have a drone in Haiti or in Tajikistan, there is no maintenance available there. So you need to send back the drone in Europe for maintenance. So it's also a main issue now. So.
Thanks. Rahel?
Thank you all. I'm Rahel. I used to do research on humanitarians for monitoring and drones for humanitarian monitoring. And now I'm working with German development where we're also looking into using/supporting cargo drones. I have two very simple questions. One is to each and every one of you, why are you personally excited about drones or not? And the second question is, we've heard about standards a little bit and sort of norm standards, and both from an ethical and from a technical view, actually. And so the question, perhaps to Kristin and Nate, where do standards start, or where should they start? Both in terms of the technical side, interoperability, usability, right? Which kind of specifications do we use, and also, of course, the regulations, the ethics. Since this is, for our field, a comparatively new thing, what have you seen work well, and where would you hope the field to move in terms of standards development?
I think since you said the first one is a question for everybody, we just go left to right, starting with Denise.
Before I started this project, I had never worked with drones before. I didn't know much about them, except my background is in remote sensing. And then when we went into the field, I was extremely surprised at how, this might sound like a cliche, but you've seen some of the small drones, and there's a lot of people out there, and it's a kind of, I'm surprised at how much I enjoyed the field work with drones. And there's something about flying things that excites a lot of people, not just, I think, me and a lot of people that were involved with it. So this is something I sort of brought up earlier in my presentation, that I was surprised how well you were able to involve communities into your community mapping endeavors. Because people were just interested and excited, and somehow it sort of lifted work that would have been maybe a bit dry to something completely different, that put people into a different mental space of doing work together. So that is, I'm not embarrassed to say that I'm not a technologist, and I don't want to push drones on anyone, and it's not my job, but this is something that I noticed about myself. So.
After that little confessional, this is great. I've been working or as an academic with drones for about 5 years, and I can go into any Norwegian village or any UN meeting or whatever unprepared, and you don't really have to prepare because people are so happy to talk about drones, no matter who they are. They really like talking about them. Anyhow, so I think I got into this field because it just contains a lot of people who are like the Donald Trump of drones. I mean, a lot of sort of really, I wouldn't say politically incorrect actors, but a lot of pretty semi-nasty people who want to sell stuff without much regard for humanitarian space, for the people they are supposedly there to help, for humanitarian principles, anything. So this is like, kind of called on the good fight. If I'm going to answer the standards question as well, I'll do the first one. Yeah, so that's so I'm sort of trying. This is my white knight possibility.
My side. Before the project, I've heard about drones, and we started using it in CartONG, but I found it's like a sexy subject, and I was not very convinced. But now, doing this deployment, I've just.
This isn't going on YouTube.
Yeah, but it's. So I'm a GIS person and a geeky person. So I was very convinced doing this deployment this year about the technology and about the output. Really, I think the drone we were using this year are so well done and so well. I mean, they are very smart. They're like, I really like them. Like, yeah, no, it's so true. Like, you can do what you want. It's to pilot this kind of thing, it's really a pleasure. No, really. So yes, now I'm convinced.
As a researcher, I'm going to use this as a finding.
Nice. So I love like satellite imagery, and so I kind of like views of the Earth, and so UAVs are just another way to collect, aerial imagery of the Earth, and so this is what really excites me, is like it's a quick, cheaper, and maybe more accurate way to collect views of the Earth, and this is what excites me. I think I'm less in the flying side of things. I've only flown a couple times, and I don't own a drone, but the imagery, the data side is what I'm interested in.
Okay, thank you. And I think let's just for the second question, let's stick with you,
yeah,
and then have Kristin finish, and then we're also out of time.
So on the standard, like the technical standards side of the standards, I think what we're going to draw a lot on is existing standards and norms around satellite imagery and in remote sensing, and so there's a lot to already draw upon in terms of in terms of the file types that we're sharing are already exist, and the ways that that can be done. I think what the kind of more unique side of newer things around are like flight plans, information around the collection. It is something that needs to be somewhat standardized, so we can understand how it was collected, or the accuracy around that collection. I think that's something to consider. And then, yeah, I think that's all that I'm going to say at the moment.
Yeah, no, I mean, with the ethics part, it's really important to understand that this is sort of semi-early days. I remember back in 2014, I was sitting at the UN and listening to people, attending a meeting at the UN, bragging about how they had smuggled their drones through customs, how they had been able to fly illegally without getting caught, how they, of course, obviously weren't insured because they would just sort of, wing it if something happened. And that kind of behavior, frankly, is quite unacceptable in the humanitarian space. And I've also been quite surprised about how the ethics effort that have been made have been met with, comments like, you can't really expect sort of volunteer drone pilots to sign up to this. It's really hindering their creativity. that this is very impractical, this is really not for us. I mean, the lack of willingness to sort of abide by humanitarian principles have been interesting. And sort of reveals to you that some of these actors have very different motivations. That said, I do think that we've come a long way. I think it's more and more obvious for many people flying drones that, responsible data is a big part of it. And in that field, there's no reinventing the wheel. It's just trying to plug that work into your own. I think with cargo drones, we're just starting, but obviously there has been done a lot of work in terms of airdrops, for example, in terms of logistics, in terms of thinking about last mile delivery. We're not starting with a basis in nothing, and I do think that we need to keep that work up. Generally, there are questions about military humanitarian partnerships, just like we have questions about private-public partnerships. They are sort of separate and we need to keep that discussion alive, I think. Humanitarian work cannot be the same as CSR. And I think it's just a running conversation. But clearly, we do need ethics, and we do need standards, and we need norms. And we need a clear agreement that this is something that everybody has to abide by.